Introduction: the silence that screams. Your voice as an instrument of power. For years, we believed that the power of speech belongs only to a privileged few. The great speakers, the natural-born leaders, those gifted with a powerful voice or a magnetic personality. That silent belief has caused many of us to remain quiet, to hide our ideas, to hold back our opinions, and to stay stuck in a secondary role in conversations we deserve to lead. But what no one told us clearly, perhaps because they didn't know themselves, is that the true power of the voice is not an innate talent, but a trainable skill. Your voice is not just a sound that comes from your throat. It's a tool for creation, for influence, for leadership. It is the most direct means you have to transform your environment, defend your ideas, and leave a mark on the minds of others. And yet, most people go through life without ever discovering that dormant power, buried beneath fear, doubt, and self-criticism. The fear of public speaking is one of the most universal and paralyzing fears. It doesn't matter your age, education level, or experience. Even the most prepared individuals feel that internal tremor when they face an audience, no matter how small. That fear is not a sign of weakness, but proof that communication matters. What scares us is not speaking itself, but not being heard. What paralyzes us is not opening our mouth, but the possibility that what comes out won't have an impact, won't be relevant, or worse, will be judged. That's why our voice shrinks, our mind clouds, and our best ideas remain trapped in our chest. But that fear is not the enemy. It's a signal that something important is about to be said. It's the doorway that, once crossed, transforms us into someone different. Clearer, stronger, more present. We've been taught to believe that communication is simply the transmission of information, as if the success of a conversation depended solely on choosing the right words. But true communication is not about reciting well-crafted phrases or memorizing polished speeches. Real communication is about connection. And connection doesn't happen through data. It happens through energy. It happens when the other person feels that you're truly there, present, sincere, committed to your message. That magnetic connection doesn't come from perfection, but from authenticity. And your voice, when trained and aligned with your truth, can be the most direct channel to that authenticity. People won't always remember exactly what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that emotion, that presence, only emerges when you speak from a deep place. Not from the fear of making mistakes, but from the certainty that your message deserves to be heard. We live in a society that overvalues degrees, certifications, and technical data, yet overlooks one of the most powerful skills of all: the ability to influence through speech. You may have the best idea in the world, but if you don't know how to express it with clarity, conviction, and magnetism, it will be lost. You may have noble intentions, clear visions, brilliant solutions, but if your voice doesn't carry them with power, they'll remain invisible to others. That's why learning to use our voice as an instrument of power, not just noise, is so urgent. Speaking with power doesn't mean shouting, imposing, or impressing. Speaking with power means knowing what to say, how to say it, and from what internal energy to say it, so that the other person doesn't just hear you but wakes up. There is a truth you can no longer ignore. You already have that power. You don't need to become someone else or copy great speakers. Your style, your rhythm, your story, your unique way of seeing the world, these are enough. You just need to unlock the voice that's been waiting for permission to be expressed. A trained voice doesn't just improve your communication, it transforms your identity. It forces you to define what you think, to organize your ideas, to express your truth with integrity. And the more you do it, the more inner confidence you generate. Not because fear disappears, but because you learn to speak even with fear. Throughout this audiobook, you will discover how to awaken that dormant power within you. This is not about empty techniques or speeches meant to impress. It's about training your most valuable instrument, your voice. You'll see that you don't need to be born with charisma. You just need to understand the laws that govern magnetic communication. You'll see that speaking with power is not a moment of temporary courage, but a constant practice that redefines how you relate to the world. And above all, you'll see that your voice doesn't just have the power to convince. It can inspire, transform, and lead. This won't just be vocal training. It will be a reprogramming of your identity as a communicator. Because deep down, we are all communicators. We're all telling a story with every word, every silence, every gesture. The difference between those who make an impact and those who go unnoticed is not in the content, but in the energy with which they communicate. And that energy can be trained, unlocked, and refined. That process begins here. I'm not speaking to you from theory. I'm speaking from experience, from someone who also felt fear, who also thought their voice didn't matter, who doubted whether their ideas were worth hearing. But I discovered something. When you speak from the root of who you are, the world responds. Not always with applause, but with attention. And that attention is the first step to leading with your message. Your voice can be the key that opens doors, creates opportunities, and builds bridges. It can be your shield when you need to defend yourself, your sword when you need to lead, your light when others walk in darkness. But only if you choose to use it with intention. Only if you commit to training it. Only if you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start speaking today, from where you are, with what you have. Silence may feel comfortable, but it doesn't transform. Speaking with power is uncomfortable at first, but liberating in the end. It's time to awaken that voice. Because this is no longer about sounding pretty, it's about sounding real. And the world needs more truth spoken in authentic voices. But before we continue, tell us from which city you're listening to this audiobook. And if this message is resonating with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel now. That way, you won't miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer each day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now, let's continue. Law 1. Speak from the root, not from the surface. When people think about improving their communication, many focus only on the visible. The words they use, the gestures they make, the tone they employ. And while these elements are important, there is something much deeper that makes the difference between a forgettable speech and one that leaves a lasting impact. That difference is not in the form, but in the origin. Because speaking from the surface is not the same as speaking from the root. The surface is what is seen, what is heard, what is memorized to impress. The root, on the other hand, is the internal place from which your message is born, the emotional truth from which it is built. When you speak from the surface, you may sound correct, but not necessarily authentic. When you speak from the root, you may not sound perfect, but you do sound real. And in today's world, what is real is magnetic. We often ask ourselves why, even when we say things well, we still fail to connect with others. Why our ideas, even if well-structured, lack impact. The reason is simple but powerful. People don't just listen to what you say, they feel where you're saying it from. Human communication is energetic before it is verbal. We can sense the tension in a voice, the doubt behind a smile, the inconsistency between body and words. That's why intention is so powerful. It can't be seen, but it's always felt. If your intention is to please, people will listen with caution. If your intention is to impress, they'll keep their distance. But if your intention is to connect, to share, to serve or to transform, something changes. Barriers fall, attention sharpens, and your message goes beyond the ears. It reaches the soul. Speaking from the root means aligning what you say with what you believe, with what you feel, with what you've lived. It means you're not speaking to sound smart, but to communicate something that truly matters to you. It means you're not repeating borrowed phrases, but offering your own truths, your own experience, your own voice. People aren't looking for brilliant speakers. They're looking for human beings who speak with truth. And truth isn't always perfect, but it is always powerful. When you allow yourself to speak from that place, from that inner root that connects your story with your message, your energy shifts. Your voice becomes firmer, your body more relaxed, your message more penetrating. You've probably encountered someone who didn't have a big vocabulary or technical speaking skills, but whose words moved you deeply. That happened because they weren't speaking from the surface, they were speaking from their root. They spoke from emotion, from lived experience, from pure intention. And that doesn't come from techniques, it comes from awareness. From the courage to stop performing and start expressing. From the willingness to stop protecting your ego and start offering your essence. True communication doesn't require masks, it requires presence. And presence isn't imposed by volume, it is revealed through truth. The question you should ask yourself before every important conversation, before every presentation, before every meaningful interaction, is not, what am I going to say? But, from where am I going to say it? From fear or from purpose? From insecurity or from experience? From a need for validation or from the certainty that your message has value? That question changes everything. Because when you speak from the fear of failing, you shrink. You become small, limited, predictable. But when you speak from your truth, even if your voice trembles, your power expands. Because people don't want perfection, they want connection. And there is no connection without authenticity. Speaking from the root does not mean being impulsive, saying the first thing that comes to mind, or speaking without a filter. It means building your message from a place deeper than intellect. From your values, your experiences, your real emotions. It means that before convincing, you seek to understand. Before making an impact, you aim to share. Before impressing, you aim to express. And in that internal shift, something extraordinary happens. You no longer need to try so hard to appear powerful, because you already are. Your message is no longer just about you, but about the value you can bring to others. And that pure intention becomes the solid foundation of magnetic communication. Throughout your life, you've likely accumulated many foreign voices, what you're expected to say, what you should think, what is correct or acceptable. But if you truly want to speak with power, you must cleanse your voice of what doesn't belong to you. You need to reconnect with your own convictions, your own words, your unique way of seeing and feeling the world. Because only from there can you build authentic communication. The root is not a physical place, it's an internal stance. It's the decision to show up as you are, to speak with intention instead of artifice, to stop hiding behind technical jargon and empty formulas, and begin sharing your message from the deepest part of who you are. You're not here to be a loudspeaker for someone else's ideas. You're here to find your own voice and use it with purpose. You're here to stop filling space with noise and start filling it with meaning. The root of your voice is not in your throat, it's in your identity. And every time you speak from there, from your story, from your values, from your purpose, the world hears you differently. No longer just as someone with something to say, but as someone worth listening to. And this is only the beginning. Because once you speak from the root, everything else, the words, the gestures, the tone, naturally aligns. You don't need to fake confidence, because confidence flows from authenticity. You don't need to control every word, because clarity arises when you speak with purpose. You don't need to chase attention, because attention arrives on its own when you communicate from a real place. Speaking from the root is a return to the essential. It is remembering that it's not about sounding good, it's about sounding true. It is understanding that your voice wasn't made to hide, but to influence, guide, and transform. And that can only happen when you dare to speak from within. Law 2. Confidence isn't something you wait for, it's something you practice. Most people wait to feel confident before they speak. They wait for the moment when fear disappears, when their heart doesn't race, their hands don't sweat, and their voice doesn't tremble. But since that moment rarely arrives on its own, they end up postponing important conversations, avoiding situations that could change their lives, and silencing ideas that deserve to be heard. What we're not taught from a young age is a powerful truth. Confidence is not a starting point, it's a result. It's not an emotional state that magically appears before you act. It is the direct consequence of consistent practice, progressive exposure, and emotional mastery developed day by day. Waiting to feel confident before you act is like waiting to be fit before you start training. It works the other way around. You act first, you practice first, and as a result, confidence is built from the inside out. Speaking with power doesn't mean speaking without fear. It means speaking despite fear. And that difference changes everything. Because instead of fighting what you feel, you learn to live with it, to use it as energy, as fuel. The voice is more than just sound. It is a reflection of your emotional state. It mirrors your internal presence. That's why, if you want to communicate with strength, you don't need to eliminate emotion. You need to learn how to channel it. Fear doesn't disappear with theory. It disappears with action. And action begins with habits. With small daily trainings that reprogram your mind and body to respond with calm where they once responded with tension. A powerful micro-habit for training your speaking confidence is to expose yourself, strategically, to slightly uncomfortable situations. You don't need to jump straight into speaking in front of 100 people. It's enough to take small daily steps into presence, raising your voice when asking a question, sharing your opinion in a meeting even if you're not 100% sure, practicing short presentations in front of a mirror or a camera. What matters is training your nervous system to be seen, to hold your message without collapsing inside. Because every time you dare to take that step, even if it's uncomfortable, you're teaching your mind that nothing bad happens. That you can feel discomfort and still move forward. That you can tremble and still have impact. Another key habit is physical voice training. Just like an athlete trains their muscles, a communicator trains their vocal instrument. Your voice can become stronger, more resonant, more present, with practice. Simple exercises like breathing deeply before speaking, projecting your voice without forcing it, reading aloud with intention, working on your diction, rhythm, intonation. All of that builds confidence. Because as you learn to master your instrument, the fear of making mistakes fades. You discover you have more control than you thought. And when you feel in control, calm arises. When calm is present, so is your presence. And when you're fully present, your communication becomes magnetic. It's also essential to change the internal narrative that feeds your insecurities. Often, what weakens our voice most isn't the environment, but the inner dialogue we repeat to ourselves. What if I mess up? What if they don't like it? What if I'm not good enough? That inner voice needs to be re-educated. You need to replace it with trained affirmations that reinforce your identity as someone capable of communicating with power. This isn't about empty self-talk. It's about remembering again and again that your voice has value, that your experience matters, that your perspective is important. Speaking with confidence isn't an act of arrogance. It's an act of self-respect. And that respect begins with how you talk to yourself before you even open your mouth. The most common mistake people make when trying to build speaking confidence is waiting for external validation as a prerequisite for feeling secure. But if you base your confidence on others' reactions, you're building on sand. Because sometimes they'll applaud, and sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll understand you, and sometimes they won't. And that cannot determine your worth. True confidence is born when you realize your message has value in and of itself, regardless of how it's received. It's born when you commit more to your growth than to approval. When you understand that speaking with power is a journey, not an instant result. A journey you travel every time you choose to step beyond your comfort zone. As you train your confidence, you also learn to reinterpret the physical symptoms of fear. That racing heart, dry mouth, the pit in your stomach. Those are not signs of weakness. They are signs of activation. Your body is preparing to be present. The key is not to resist them, but to breathe with them, inhabit them, and transform them into focused energy. Instead of thinking, I'm nervous, you can think, I'm ready. That simple mental shift has an immediate impact on your body and voice. It's also vital that you stop waiting to feel perfect before you communicate something important. You don't need to know everything. You don't need a flawless speech. What you need is commitment. Commitment to your message, to your continuous improvement, to your authenticity. People aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to conviction. And conviction shows when someone speaks with clarity, even when afraid. When someone stands by their words, even if their voice shakes. When someone chooses truth over fear of judgment. In time, you'll discover that confidence isn't a destination. It's a way of walking. That it's not about speaking like the greats, but speaking like you, from the best of who you are. That it's not about eliminating vulnerability, but turning it into strength. And then something profound changes. You stop speaking to protect yourself, and start speaking to serve. You stop performing to hide, and start expressing to make an impact. Because your voice, with practice, becomes an extension of your leadership. It's not just a medium to transmit ideas. It's a declaration of presence. Speaking with strength even when you feel afraid isn't a contradiction. It's a choice. A choice you make every time you decide to show up, even without guarantees. Every time you choose to share your message, even with doubts. Every time you take action, even without certainty. That is the real practice of power. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Until one day, you realize you don't have to force it anymore, because your voice is already there. Ready, clear, strong. Because your confidence no longer depends on feeling good. It comes from knowing that what you have to say deserves to be heard. Law 3. Structure that captivates. The prep method. One of the most common reasons people lose impact when speaking isn't due to a lack of ideas, but a lack of structure. They have something valuable to say, but they communicate it in a confusing, scattered, or improvised way. They jump from one topic to another aimlessly, lose the listener's attention, and unintentionally dilute the power of their message. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of a clear framework, a guide that helps organize their thoughts logically, naturally, and persuasively. Speaking with clarity isn't a mysterious talent. It's a skill that can be trained. And one of the most practical, powerful, and accessible tools to achieve that is the PREP method. PREP is a simple yet extremely effective acronym. It stands for point, reason, example, point. It's a four-step structure that allows you to organize any idea you want to communicate in a way that captures attention, conveys logic, and leaves a clear impression. It works in informal conversations, formal presentations, debates, interviews, speeches, meetings, or even written messages. Because clarity is universal. When you learn to organize your ideas, you become more persuasive, more respected, more memorable. People listen to you with more interest and less effort, because you're making the mental process of understanding you easier. And in a world overloaded with information, that is a monumental advantage. The first part of the method is the point. Here, you clearly define what you want to say. No beating around the bush, no unnecessary context, no attempts to impress. You go straight to the point. A clear, concrete, direct sentence. Example, I believe we should reduce the length of our weekly meetings. That's your position, your main idea. If you can't say it in one sentence, you probably don't yet have full clarity on what you truly want to communicate. That's why the first step is always taking a few seconds to identify your main point. One idea at a time. One message per intervention. The second step is the reason. Here, you explain why that point is important, necessary, or valid. You're giving logic, support, structure. Continuing the example, because right now our meetings run too long and that affects the team's productivity. This step is crucial because it gives your point a foundation. Without a reason, your idea may sound arbitrary or shallow. But when you explain the why, you're building a mental bridge between your message and the listener's logic. You're activating the rational part of their brain, and that increases the chances of acceptance. The third part of the method is the example. This is where you bring your argument down to earth with a concrete situation, a piece of evidence, an anecdote, or a real fact. Example, last week, our meeting lasted almost 2 hours, and more than half the team mentally checked out before we finished. The example turns your idea into something visual, emotional, relatable. It transforms your message from an abstract idea into a tangible experience. Humans think in images and emotions, and the example is the most effective way to activate that part of the brain. An idea without an example is like a seed without soil. It has potential, but it won't take root. The last step is to repeat your original point, now reinforced. You close with clarity. You return to your original idea, but now, after having supported it with reason and example, your message has more strength, structure, and emotional weight. Like this, that's why I believe we should keep our meetings to a maximum of 1 hour. This closing gives your listener a sense of order, of resolution, of a complete message. It's not about repeating for the sake of it. It's about closing the circle of your argument. And that creates a sense of confidence and authority in your communication. Now, this structure becomes even more powerful when you practice it in different contexts. You can train with it in everyday conversations. Every time you give your opinion, use PREP. You can write down random ideas and develop them using this format. You can practice with topics you know well, and also with topics that are new to you. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Eventually, speaking with this structure will feel automatic, and the best part is, your listener won't even notice you're following a method. They'll just feel that you're clear, coherent, and persuasive. And that's exactly the goal. Many people think that to be persuasive they need to say more, fill silences with words, sound sophisticated. But true persuasion lies in clarity. In saying what matters, with structure, with intention, and without unnecessary embellishment. A powerful voice isn't one that says a lot. It's one that speaks with precision. And the PREP method trains you to do just that, to communicate with impact, effortlessly. What's more, this method has an additional benefit many overlook. It reduces your anxiety when speaking. When you have a clear mental framework, you don't need to improvise out of chaos. You know where to start, how to proceed, and how to close. That gives you calm, confidence, and control. And when you're calm, your voice becomes steadier, your body relaxes, your message flows. Inner order creates outer order. That's why learning to structure your ideas is also a way of training your stage presence. Imagine you're in a work meeting and someone asks for your opinion on a proposal. Without a method, you might start rambling, hesitating, filling space with insecure phrases. But if prep is in your mind, you can respond like this. I think we should reevaluate this proposal, point, because it doesn't align with the objectives we set at the beginning of the quarter, reason. For example, the approach it suggests pulls us away from the key outcomes we agreed on, example. That's why I believe we should make some adjustments before approving it, point. You don't just sound clearer, you sound more prepared, more professional, more influential. And all thanks to a simple framework that guides your thinking. If there's one skill that can instantly transform your communication impact, it's this: the ability to structure your ideas with clarity. You can have the best trained voice, the strongest presence, the most persuasive tone, but if your ideas come out disorganized, your message gets lost. That's why you should never underestimate the power of structure. Because structure doesn't take away from your natural voice, it gives it direction. And a voice with direction carries more weight, more power, more magnetism. Next time you have something important to say, don't start speaking without a mental map. Take a breath, think prep, and let your message follow that natural flow. Point, reason, example, point. It's simple, yet effective. Structured, yet flexible. Practical, yet profoundly powerful. And the more you practice it, the more it becomes part of you. Because ultimately, speaking with power isn't just about volume, it's about structure. A clear structure gives you a clear voice. And a clear voice wins minds and hearts. Law 4. Magnetic silence, the art of pausing. We live in an era of excess information, excess stimulation, excess words. Everyone wants to speak, everyone wants to be heard, everyone is competing for attention. And in the midst of this constant noise, the most powerful move is no longer to say more, but to know when to stay silent. Silence, which many fear in communication, is actually one of the most magnetic and persuasive tools you can learn to master. Not the awkward silence of someone who doesn't know what to say, but the intentional, strategic silence that holds attention, creates anticipation, and sets the rhythm of your message. Just like the pause in a beautiful piece of music. Because yes, voice creates impact, but silence defines it. One common mistake among those who want to speak with power is believing they must fill every second with words, that if they pause, they'll lose credibility or authority. Nothing could be further from the truth. Speaking without pausing creates the opposite effect. Words pile up, the audience gets overwhelmed, and the message loses strength. But when you learn to pause, right at the crucial moment, silence becomes emphasis. It becomes a highlighter, a space for the listener to process, a reflection of confidence. Because only someone secure in their message can afford to be silent without fear. Silence is also a form of presence. When you pause, your nonverbal language is saying, what I just said matters, or what I'm about to say deserves your full attention. It's an invitation to deep listening. It's a sign that you're not rushing, that you don't need to fill space out of nervousness, but that you own the room, you command the rhythm, and you are leading the interaction. Because speaking is not just about making sound, it's about directing energy. And well-placed silence concentrates that energy, intensifies it, and makes it irresistible. Using pauses effectively first requires a mental re-education. Silence is not the enemy, it's your ally. And the first step to mastering it is becoming aware of it. In your daily conversations, notice when you interrupt yourself out of fear of a gap. Notice when you speak fast because you're afraid people will stop listening. Notice how you feel in the seconds between one phrase and another. Those moments hold valuable information. That's where you'll discover your relationship with silence. And from that awareness, you can begin to turn it into a tool that works for you. Practicing intentional silence doesn't mean becoming artificial or dramatic. It means learning to breathe with your message. It means knowing that after a powerful idea, a pause gives it weight. That before an important question, a pause generates attention. That during a story, a pause builds suspense. And that when someone listens to you in silence, they're not necessarily judging, they're processing. The other person's silence is also part of communication, and the more comfortable you are with it, the deeper your impact will be. A practical exercise to develop this skill is to read any text aloud, be it a story, an article, or a speech, and after each meaningful sentence, pause for at least 2 seconds. At first, it will feel eternal, uncomfortable. But then you'll notice how the sentence gains power, how your voice develops rhythm, how your message breathes. Another exercise is to count to 3 in your mind after asking a question. Don't fill that space with more words. Let the silence do its job. That pause allows the question to sink in, gives the listener time to think, and invites a genuine response. Instead of pushing with words, you lead with presence. Silence is also a detector of authenticity. When someone is comfortable with silence, they project confidence. When someone pauses before answering, they demonstrate emotional intelligence. When someone pauses after saying something important, they convey certainty. And that certainty doesn't come from talking louder, it comes from connecting deeper. Silence communicates that you don't need to justify every word. That you trust your message. That you're giving space for the other person to feel, reflect, and respond. In leadership, negotiation, teaching, or sales, strategic silence is often more powerful than any argument. Because it forces others to fill the space. Because it creates constructive tension that grabs attention. Because it turns what could have been a monologue into an interactive experience. Every time you use silence with intention, you're saying, I'm here, fully present, and you should be too. And that kind of presence is impossible to ignore. But beyond technique, there's something deeper about silence. It's the space where truth settles. When we fill every second with words, we often avoid feeling. But when we pause, when we hold the space, something is revealed. An emotion, an intuition, an inner clarity. That's why mastering silence doesn't just improve your communication. It deepens your self-awareness. It forces you to be with yourself, with your message, with your truth. And from that inner presence, a voice with real power is born. Just as music gains rhythm through pauses, communication gains presence through silence. A good pause is like a blink in a conversation. Necessary, rhythmic, human. It shouldn't be feared, but trained. It shouldn't be eliminated, but directed. Because when you master silence, your entire message is elevated. You no longer need to speak more to say more. You realize that sometimes, what's not said is what's most heard. That the space between words can be more eloquent than the words themselves. And that true authority doesn't shout, it breathes. To speak with power is also to know when not to speak. And in that apparent void lies the strength of someone who doesn't need to fill space to impress, but chooses to pause to connect. Because the one who masters silence, masters the message. And the one who masters the message, transforms the world. Law 5. A tone that captivates. There is something in the voice that cannot be faked. Even if the content is exactly the same, the way it's delivered completely changes the effect it has on the listener. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. You can have the best argument, the brightest idea, the most important message. But if your tone doesn't support it, that message loses strength, loses life, loses impact. The voice is an emotional fingerprint. Tone is the invisible vehicle that carries your energy, your intention, your truth. It determines whether your message builds trust or distrust, whether it attracts or repels, whether it leads or fades away. And the fascinating part is, your tone isn't fixed. You can train it, shape it, expand it, refine it. You can turn your voice into a tool of emotional influence if you learn to listen to it, to feel it, and to direct it. Tone is the soul of your voice. It's not just about sounding good. It's about sounding aligned with what you feel and with what you want to generate in others. Some tones inspire calm, others spark enthusiasm, some provoke immediate authority, while others create empathy or deep emotional connection. But they all have one thing in common. They are rooted in intention. Intention is the foundation of any authentic tone. If you speak with fear, your voice reveals it. If you speak with a desire to manipulate, it shows. But if you speak with a genuine desire to share, your voice becomes a real bridge. That's why, before speaking, ask yourself, what do I want the other person to feel when I say this? Because based on that intention, your body and your voice will begin to align. At first unconsciously, and with practice consciously and deliberately. A captivating voice isn't necessarily soft. It can be firm, intense, warm, playful, deep, or energetic. What makes it attractive is its congruence. When the emotional intention within you is expressed clearly through your tone, something magnetic happens. The other person doesn't just hear your message, they feel it. And that's where true power is born. For example, if you want to build trust, your voice needs to be steady, fluid, with natural pauses and a downward intonation at the end of sentences. That communicates security. If your voice is shaky, with sudden pitch changes or excessive speed, you transmit anxiety or uncertainty. But if you breathe, slightly slow your pace, leave space between your words, and use a firm yet human tone, the listener lowers their defenses, pays closer attention, opens up. If you want to generate interest, you need to play with your vocal rhythm and energy. You can't speak monotonously and expect the listener to stay engaged. You need to naturally vary your volume, pitch, and emphasis. Highlight keywords, speed up during moments of enthusiasm, lower your volume to create intimacy or suspense. Human attention is triggered by the unexpected. If your voice is predictable, the listener's mind disconnects. But if you create a dynamic rhythm, with highs and lows, strategic pauses, and subtle changes in intensity, you keep your audience emotionally engaged. And if what you want is to project authority, your voice needs to be grounded. Not through rigidity or force, but through internal firmness. Vocal authority comes from controlled volume, intentional pauses, downward-ending intonation, and a steady rhythm that doesn't speed up under pressure. You don't need to shout. On the contrary, a voice that knows how to use volume with purpose is far more persuasive than one that tries to dominate by force. Sometimes, a statement delivered with calm and conviction is more impactful than one shouted with urgency. Authority isn't imposed, it's projected. And it's projected through a voice that knows its worth, that doesn't apologize for being heard, that takes up space without arrogance, but with solidity. Practicing your tone means training your vocal awareness. Start by recording yourself. Observe how you sound when you're relaxed, excited, rushed, or nervous. Do you speak too quickly? Does your voice rise at the end of each sentence as if asking for permission to speak? Do you sound monotonous or overly energetic? Listening to yourself is the first step toward refining your instrument. Then, practice reading texts with different emotional intentions. Read a sentence joyfully, then firmly, then calmly, then tenderly. Play with your voice like a musician plays their instrument. Learn to break out of your habitual tone and expand your range of expression. It's not about acting, it's about inhabiting your full expressive potential. Breathing is key in this process. A voice that captivates comes from conscious breathing. When you breathe shallowly, your voice becomes tense, choppy, rushed. But when you breathe from the abdomen, deeply, your voice becomes more stable, resonant, fluid. Start every interaction with a deep breath. Let yourself feel your body. Your voice isn't just air vibrating through your vocal cords, it's energy flowing through your entire system. A powerful voice isn't born in the throat, it's born in the whole body. That's why moving, stretching, and releasing physical tension also directly impact the quality of your tone. Remember, your voice is an emotional tool. It's not about sounding like someone else, it's about sounding like the most present, authentic version of you. As you train your tone, you'll start to notice your presence changing too. People will feel more connected to you, more receptive, more influenced. Because your voice no longer just informs, it transforms. It's a voice that doesn't just speak, but leaves an imprint. A voice that doesn't just sound good, but carries truth. And this doesn't happen overnight. It's an art. An art cultivated with practice, patience, and sensitivity. But it's an art that transforms how you communicate, how you lead, how you impact. When your voice aligns with your intention, when your tone reflects your internal energy, you enter a state of powerful coherence. People feel it, and so do you. Because you're no longer speaking just to fill space. You're speaking to evoke emotion. And a well-directed emotion has more power than any argument. It doesn't matter if you feel your voice isn't where you want it to be right now. That's not a sentence. It's a starting point. Every exercise, every recording, every conscious conversation is a chance to expand your vocal power. And that power doesn't just change how you speak, it changes how you're perceived. Because at the end of the day, a trained voice is a strengthened identity. It's a declaration of your presence, your intention, your leadership. And when your voice captivates, your message is no longer forgotten. It stays, it's felt, it's remembered. Because tone doesn't just decorate your message, it turns it into an experience. Law 6. The body also speaks. The body never lies. While words can be carefully chosen and the voice can be modulated with intention, the body constantly reveals what we truly feel, believe, or desire. When you speak, you're not only communicating with your voice, you're communicating with every movement, every posture, every gesture. Your body emits constant signals that either reinforce or sabotage your message, often without you even noticing. That's why, if you want to speak with power, you need more than a good idea or a trained voice. You need physical presence. You need a body that is aligned with your message. Because when your body says one thing and your mouth says another, the listener's unconscious will always believe the body. Body language is not about using artificial or forced gestures. It's not about learning a choreography of movements that supposedly convey confidence or persuasion. It's about something much deeper. Being present in your body. Occupying your posture. Feeling your feet on the ground. Noticing the tension in your shoulders or jaw and learning to release it. From that state of physical awareness, true nonverbal communication is born. When you are present in your body, your energy stabilizes, your voice becomes grounded, and your gaze becomes clearer. And that presence is felt effortlessly. You don't need to say anything to make an impact. Your very presence already communicates authority, calm, and authenticity. Posture is one of the most visible and immediate elements of nonverbal communication. An upright, open posture, with shoulders back and chest slightly lifted, conveys confidence, openness, and leadership. In contrast, a hunched, closed, or tense posture signals insecurity, defensiveness, or submission. No matter how powerful your words are, if your body is collapsed, your message loses strength. But when you stand firmly, align your spine, root your feet, and relax your torso, your body becomes a clean channel for your message. It doesn't block or interfere, it reinforces. Gestures speak as well. Your hands are not there to fill space, they're there to give life to your ideas. A well-placed gesture can emphasize a key point, mark a transition, or add emotional weight to a statement. But if your gestures are repetitive, erratic, or excessive, they distract. The key isn't to gesture more, but to gesture with intention. It's not about controlling your hands like a robot, but allowing their natural expressiveness while maintaining awareness of what you're communicating. Let your gestures come from the message, not from anxiety. And if you don't know what to do with your hands, start by not hiding them. Hide your hands and you appear insecure. Show your hands and you appear open, confident, and transparent. Your face is also an emotional mirror. A relaxed facial expression, congruent with what you're saying, creates immediate connection. A smile, when used authentically, has the power to relax the listener and open the emotional channel. But not every situation calls for a smile. Sometimes what's needed is a firm gaze, a look of genuine interest, a reflective pause accompanied by a slight frown. Your face needs to be alive, present, and in sync with what you're saying and feeling. Because if your words say enthusiasm, but your face says boredom, the other person will feel the disconnect. And where there is disconnect, there is distrust. One of the most common mistakes in nonverbal communication is moving too much, pacing aimlessly, constantly shifting posture, making compulsive gestures, or fidgeting nervously. All of that signals anxiety. Power, on the other hand, is expressed through stability. You can move, yes, but with purpose. You can walk, but with direction. Every movement should have a reason. And often, the greatest strength lies in stillness. A still, grounded body, with a steady gaze and a firm voice, can create more impact than any amount of words delivered in a rush. Another key aspect is breathing. Your breath doesn't just affect your voice, it also affects your body. When you breathe shallowly, your body tenses, your movements become erratic, your energy disperses. But when you breathe deeply from the abdomen, your body relaxes, your posture stabilizes, and your presence expands. Breathing consciously before speaking, during a pause, or even while listening, brings you back to the present. And being present is the foundation of any powerful communication. Because when you are present, so is your audience. Your presence invites theirs. Your body conveys it. Your gaze deserves special mention. Your eyes don't just look, they speak. A direct gaze, calm and intentional, can open more doors than any argument. But this isn't about staring forcefully, it's about holding eye contact with calm and humanity. Looking at someone as you speak shows them that you are there, that you are connected, that you're not just talking, but communicating from your truth. And looking at someone while they speak tells them, I'm with you. I value you. I respect you. That is a silent, but powerful, form of influence. True physical presence isn't achieved through tricks, it's achieved through awareness. Awareness of your body, your breath, your gestures, your energy. When you cultivate that awareness, you start noticing when you're rushing, when you're tense, when you've lost your center. And instead of continuing to speak from disconnection, you can pause, breathe, correct your posture, and regain your grounding. That doesn't just improve your communication. It transforms you from the inside out. Because you learn to inhabit yourself, to ground yourself, and to communicate from a place that is solid, calm, and magnetic. Speaking with power is not just a vocal act, it is a physical act. It is a full body message in which every part of you says, I'm here. I believe in what I say. And I have something important to share. That alignment between body, voice, and message is what creates true magnetism. It's not about impressing, it's about conveying truth with presence. About claiming your space with respect, looking others in the eye without fear, and speaking from a body that is alive and grounded. And like all powerful things, this can be trained. You don't need to be an expert in body language. You just need to start paying attention. Observe yourself, adjust with compassion, and integrate small changes that create big effects. Because your body is your most powerful ally in the art of communication. And when your body speaks in harmony with your voice, the impact is inevitable. Because you are no longer just someone who delivers information. You become someone who creates transformation. And that, in today's world, is more needed than ever. Law 7. The gaze that convinces. The gaze is one of the most powerful and underestimated elements of human communication. You can say so much without moving your lips, without raising your voice, without uttering a single word. Through your eyes, you convey intention, truth, presence, confidence, empathy, strength, or doubt. When someone looks at you with real attention, with authentic presence, with a clear and focused energy, a connection is created that words alone could never achieve. And when someone avoids your gaze or nervously looks away, their message, no matter how well structured, loses depth, credibility, and soul. Because eyes don't just see, they speak. They speak even before you start talking, and often continue to speak long after you've finished. To look with presence is more than simply making eye contact. It's holding attention with intention. It's saying with your gaze, I'm here with you, I'm truly listening, I'm speaking to you from a place of truth. That kind of look has an almost immediate effect. It breaks down barriers, builds trust, and invites the other person to open up. People are tired of being ignored, of being seen superficially, of talking to distracted listeners. That's why, when someone looks at them with genuine presence, that person stands out instantly. Because it's rare. Because it's intentional. Because it's an act of offering oneself. Some people, out of nerves or habit, avoid eye contact. They look at the floor, the ceiling, a fixed point, their notes, anywhere but the person they're talking to. Sometimes out of shyness, other times out of insecurity, and often simply because they don't realize what their gaze can actually communicate. But when you avoid looking, you're sending a silent message, I don't trust myself, I don't want you to see me, I'm not fully here. And even if your words are brilliant, The lack of eye contact communicates disconnection. The gaze, on the other hand, when used with awareness, projects confidence without arrogance. It affirms your message without needing volume. It commands attention effortlessly. One of the great secrets of speaking with power is learning to look before speaking. Feel the other person, observe them, sense their energy, breathe with their presence. A deep gaze before your first word can set the tone for the entire conversation. You're saying, I'm connected to you. I'm not here to impose. I'm here to share. I'm present. That initial gaze lays the emotional foundation. It's like silently opening a door to connection. And once the conversation starts, maintaining that gaze, holding it with warmth and ease, creates an invisible channel through which authentic influence flows. This doesn't mean staring like a robot, nor does it mean using an intense or forced gaze. It's about learning to sustain eye contact calmly, kindly, and with a natural rhythm. Yes, you can look away from time to time. That's human. But make sure you come back. Reconnect. Don't speak to the void, or the floor, or the air. Speak to the real person in front of you. Because it's in that consistent reconnection that the bridge of credibility is built. When you speak while looking with presence, every word feels stronger, more heartfelt, more true. And if you're speaking to a larger group, at a conference, during a presentation, or in a classroom, the principle is the same. Don't look over their heads into space. Look at actual people. Choose a face, hold the gaze for a full thought, then move on to another. This not only grounds you, but also makes each listener feel as though you're speaking directly to them. That personalized experience in a group setting is what turns a regular talk into a memorable moment. People may not remember everything you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And feeling seen with respect, genuine interest, and presence is one of the most powerful emotional impacts you can create. Training your gaze takes practice, but more importantly, it takes courage. Because when you look, you also expose yourself. You allow yourself to be seen. And that can feel uncomfortable at first. But it's precisely in that act of openness where your power lies. Because to look with presence is not just about seeing others, it's also about affirming yourself. It's saying, I'm here. And I'm ready to be seen. That kind of energy, when it's real, is magnetic. It melts away distrust. It dissolves doubt. It opens the door to real connection. A simple exercise to train your gaze is to practice in front of a mirror. Look at yourself without judgment. Look at yourself as if you were listening to yourself for the first time. Then, record a video of yourself talking about a subject you know well, and observe what your eyes do. Can you look directly into the camera? Do you look away at key moments? Do you close your eyes or blink rapidly when saying something important? All of that gives you insight into your current patterns. And once you're aware of them, you can shift them. You can begin to choose to look from a place of presence instead of avoidance or autopilot. Your gaze also changes depending on the emotion you want to convey. A soft, relaxed look creates closeness. A steady, focused look communicates authority. A bright gaze, paired with a sincere smile, transmits enthusiasm. A calm gaze, held in silence, can emotionally hold someone more powerfully than 1,000 words. Learning to read and use these nuances is part of becoming a magnetic communicator. Because you're not just transmitting ideas, you're holding space for the emotional experience of the listener. And there's something even deeper. Your gaze reflects your level of inner connection. When you're aligned with yourself, when you're centered, when you speak from your truth, your eyes are clear, grounded, powerful. But when you're disconnected, your gaze becomes clouded, evasive, scattered. That's why working on your gaze also means working on your relationship with yourself. It's about cultivating that inner presence that radiates outward. It's about living each word, each pause, each silence with eye contact as an emotional anchor. In a world where everyone is staring at their screens and real contact has become rare, to look with presence is almost a revolutionary act. It's telling the other person, I see you. And being seen, truly seen, is one of the deepest human needs. That's why, when you develop the ability to look with intention, with truth, with clarity, your impact multiplies. Because your message is no longer just traveling through the auditory channel. It's also reaching through the visual, emotional, and intuitive channels. And that doesn't just convince, it transforms. Because an authentic gaze doesn't need explanation. It's felt. And what's felt deeply is remembered forever. Law 8. Listen to master. Listening. A simple, everyday word, often misunderstood. In a world where everyone wants to talk, stand out, share their opinions, have the last word, listening has become a forgotten art. Yet the true masters of communication are not the ones who speak the most, but those who listen best. Because those who listen deeply dominate the emotional terrain, understand what others don't say, anticipate reactions, detect hidden needs, and respond with a precision that feels almost magical. Listening is power, but not a loud power. It is silent, invisible, profound. The kind of power that transforms a simple conversation into an opportunity for leadership, influence, and real connection. Listening to master is not about dominating others. It's about reading the emotional map of the moment so clearly that you can guide the interaction to a more authentic, effective, and transformative place. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. While the other person is talking, they're already formulating what they're going to say. They interrupt. They give advice too early. They compare what they hear to their own experiences and shift the focus to themselves. And by doing so, they miss an invaluable opportunity to truly understand the other. Real listening means emptying yourself for a moment, creating inner silence, suspending judgment, and opening fully to the message the other is transmitting, not just through words, but through emotions, tone, and body language. It means being present, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. That total presence is what transforms an ordinary listener into a magnetic one. A magnetic listener is someone who makes others feel seen, understood, and valued. It's the person people seek out to talk to, because they feel heard without being judged, respected even in their vulnerability. And the paradox is this: the one who listens deeply doesn't just generate trust and closeness, they also gain powerful information. Because by listening, you discover what motivates the other, what blocks them, what excites them, what frustrates them. Listening is the gathering of emotional data, and that data gives you an edge. Not to manipulate, but to influence with precision. To speak to what truly matters. To touch the exact emotional nerve that needs to be awakened. Listening is also a form of leadership. In every human interaction, there's an energetic dance. And those who listen masterfully don't get swept away by the noise, they lead with calm. Because understanding before speaking allows you to respond with clarity, empathy, and direction. Often, the leader is not the one who speaks first, but the one who listens best. Because listening creates context. And the one who has the context owns the room. Listening is not passivity, it's strategy. Not weakness, but emotional mastery. The best negotiators, coaches, and leaders all have trained listening. They know when to stay silent, when to intervene, when to reframe, when to simply hold space with a calm, grounded presence. To train yourself as a magnetic listener, the first step is developing auditory awareness. That means listening beyond the words. Listen to the tone, the pace, the emphasis, the pauses. Listen to what's said and what's left unsaid. Listen with your whole body. When someone speaks, ask yourself, what are they feeling as they say this? What do they need in this moment, to be understood, held, or challenged? This deep listening will radically transform your ability to respond. Because you'll no longer react from ego, but respond from understanding. And that response is always more precise, more human, more powerful. Another key practice is active silence. Many fear that if they stay silent too long, they'll seem insecure or disengaged. But in truth, well-held silence is one of the most powerful tools in listening. When you don't interrupt, when you hold space, when you don't fill every gap with your ideas, you invite the other to go deeper, to explore further, to trust more, to feel seen. And often, in that space, truths emerge that would never have surfaced if you'd spoken too soon. Silence is fertile. Silence hears what words cannot say. A powerful technique to strengthen your listening is reflective reformulation, repeating in your own words what the other has said. Not like a parrot, but to validate, to confirm, to show that you truly understood. Something like, so, if I understand you correctly, what's bothering you isn't just the outcome, but how the decision is being made, right? That kind of reflection creates instant connection. The other person feels not only heard, but understood. And when someone feels understood, they lower their defenses, they open up, they collaborate. Empathic listening builds bridges. And bridges are where real influence happens. It's also important to learn to listen even when you disagree. Listening doesn't mean agreeing. It means being available. You can hold your own perspective while staying open to someone else's. That openness makes you flexible, adaptable, strategic. Because you're not trapped in your opinion. You're building from dialogue. And in a world growing ever more polarized, the one who knows how to listen becomes valuable, necessary, influential. They bring balance where there is rigidity, and understanding where there is judgment. Listening also transforms you from within. When you learn to listen, your ego softens. You realize you don't always need to be right, or to impress. You discover there is wisdom in every voice, that every story has something to teach, that every person is fighting a silent battle. That awareness makes you more compassionate, deeper, more whole. And when you speak from that place, your message vibrates differently. Because you no longer speak to be heard. You speak because you have heard. The most beautiful paradox of communication is this. The better you listen, the more powerful your words become. Because your words no longer come from emptiness. They are born from the other. And when your words carry the energy of listening, they resonate, they impact, they transform. Listening to master is not an act of passivity. It's an act of wisdom. It's the kind of mastery that doesn't need to impose, because it is already aligned with the other's reality. And that alignment is, ultimately, the true art of magnetic communication. Because the one who knows how to listen with their soul, speaks with silent authority. And that is the voice the world needs to hear. Law 9. Master the emotional territory. All communication, at its deepest essence, is an exchange of emotional energy. While most people believe the key lies in the content of the message, the truth is that real impact doesn't come only from what is said, but from how it's said, and from the internal state from which it's delivered. The emotional energy behind your words is what determines how your message is received. Whether it's remembered, respected, rejected, or truly felt. That's why if you want to speak with real power, you need more than technical mastery. You must learn to master your emotional territory. Because every time you speak, you bring your energy into someone else's space. And if you don't know how to manage it, your communication becomes unstable, chaotic, unpredictable. But when you learn to regulate your emotions before, during, and after speaking, every word you deliver carries a weight of authenticity, clarity, and magnetism. And that doesn't just create impact. That transforms. Mastering the emotional territory doesn't mean repressing what you feel. It's not about faking calm when you're trembling inside, or forcing enthusiasm when what you really feel is fear. It's about knowing your emotions, allowing yourself to feel them without being controlled by them, and channeling them in a conscious and useful way. Emotions don't just disappear. If you don't manage them, they leak into your voice, your gestures, your tone. Your audience or conversation partner, even if unconsciously, picks up on that emotional vibration and reacts to it. Your anxiety might generate discomfort. Your insecurity might generate mistrust. But your well-held authenticity, that generates deep connection. And that's the key. It's not about eliminating emotion. It's about holding it with presence. Before speaking, the first thing you must do is observe your emotional state. Are you nervous? Are you speeding up? Are you overstimulated or shut down? Taking a moment to check in with your state before you communicate is an act of emotional intelligence. It's looking at yourself honestly and saying, this is where I am right now, and I'm going to work with it. Not from judgment, but from awareness. Because when you're aware, you can make choices. You can breathe more deeply. You can stretch your body. You can give yourself 2 minutes of silence before speaking. You can shift your focus from, will they like me? To, what value am I here to deliver? That simple shift transforms your energy completely. During communication, emotional regulation becomes a continuous act of presence. It's natural for emotions to arise. Doubt, excitement, fear, pride, discomfort. And this is where presence matters most. Breathe. Feel your body. Notice if your voice tightens, if your mind races, if your words are coming from pressure or from balance. And when you sense that you're off-center, you don't need to force a stop. You just need to return to your breath. Return to a conscious pause. Anchor yourself back into the intention that brought you to speak in the first place. Because any emotion, no matter how intense, can be moved through, not by fighting it or hiding it, but by recognizing it and deciding how to respond. That ability to emotionally navigate in real time is what separates an average communicator from an extraordinary one. After speaking, you also need a conscious emotional closure. Many people, after a conversation or presentation, get trapped in self-criticism, overanalysis, regret. They ask themselves, did I say the right thing? Did I sound okay? Did I embarrass myself? That internal rumination weakens their energy, affects their self-esteem, and stops them from enjoying the process. That's why, after communicating, it's vital to take an internal pause and acknowledge your effort. Celebrate your presence. Validate your intention, even if there were mistakes. Because real growth doesn't come from perfection, it comes from honest practice. And if every time you speak, you end with internal appreciation rather than judgment, you strengthen your energy for the next time. Emotional mastery also means knowing what kind of energy you want to transmit in each situation. Not every conversation requires the same emotional charge. Some moments call for high energy, enthusiasm, motivation. Others require calm, pause, containment. And that conscious choice of what emotion to project is what gives you flexibility and power. Because you're not reacting, you're choosing. You're not being carried by your emotions, you're leading them. That is true charisma. That is conscious presence. That is strategic emotional influence. To train this skill, start by identifying your emotional patterns before speaking. What usually happens to you emotionally in key moments? Do you tend to speed up, freeze, tense up? Once you know your patterns, create emotional preparation rituals. Specific breaths, visualizations, anchoring phrases, physical movements. You don't need anything elaborate. Sometimes it's enough to close your eyes for a moment and remind yourself, I'm here to contribute. What I have to say has value. And my energy is my message. That simple intention aligns your emotions, your mind, and your body. And when you feel fear, don't treat it like an enemy. Fear isn't the problem. The problem is how you relate to it. If you fight it, it consumes you. If you ignore it, it leaks out. But if you look at it calmly and choose to move forward with it, that fear transforms into usable energy. Great communicators feel fear, but they convert it into presence. They transform it into internal fire. Because they've learned that emotional territory isn't conquered through suppression, but through navigation. It's not mastered through rigidity, but through conscious flexibility. And so, you discover that speaking with power is not a cold, logical, detached act. It's a deeply emotional one. And the more you learn to manage your internal energy, the more magnetic your message becomes. Because people don't just hear your words, they feel your state. And that state is transmitted in every gesture, every tone, every pause. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be present. You don't need to control every emotion. You need to coexist with them. Because emotional mastery isn't about eliminating your humanity. It's about embracing it with awareness. In mastering your emotional territory, you become a complete communicator. Capable of holding your energy before, during, and after speaking. Capable of choosing what to project. Capable of connecting from a real place, not a forced one. And that ability not only improves how you communicate with others, it deepens your relationship with yourself. Because every time you choose to respond instead of react, you grow. You strengthen. You turn your voice into a coherent extension of your inner world. And that is the greatest power of all, emotional congruence. The voice that comes from someone who knows themselves, regulates themselves, and expresses their truth. That is the voice that transforms. That is the voice that gets remembered. Law 10. Simplify or disappear. In a world oversaturated with information, opinions, and constant messages coming from every direction, clarity has become a rare commodity. And precisely for that reason, it's become extremely valuable. The human mind doesn't love complexity, it loves clarity. It rejects what's tangled, dense, or ambiguous. Processing complex ideas takes mental energy, and our brain, by nature, wants to conserve that energy. That's why great communicators aren't the ones who use the most sophisticated words or who speak the longest. They're the ones who manage to say more with less. The ones who, with a single phrase, illuminate an idea. The ones who, with a few words, leave a lasting impact. The ones who have understood a fundamental law of powerful communication. Simplify or disappear. Speaking clearly is not the same as speaking superficially. In fact, simplifying takes more intelligence than complicating. Because to simplify, you must understand. Only someone who truly grasps what they want to express can reduce it to its essence without losing depth. The problem with many communicators is that they haven't distilled their ideas. They speak from accumulation, not synthesis. They pack their speech with technical terms, unnecessary explanations, verbal ornaments that distract more than they help. And the result is that, even if they seem to say a lot, nothing is understood. Or worse, everything is forgotten. Simplification begins with intention. Before you speak, ask yourself, what do I want this person to remember? What do I want them to feel? What do I want them to do? That clarity forces you to prioritize. Because when everything is important, nothing is. You need to choose the heart of your message, the idea worth defending, the concept that deserves to be written in a single sentence. And once you find that core, remove what gets in its way. Don't repeat unnecessarily. Don't get lost in redundant explanations. Don't circle around to avoid saying what you really think. Be direct, but not harsh. Precise, but not dry. Clear, but not flat. That is the alchemy of simplification. To say the essential with beauty, with impact, with humanity. A communicator who knows how to simplify becomes memorable. Because their message enters easily, is processed quickly, and stays within. The audience doesn't need to struggle to follow them. They don't need to decode what's being said. Everything flows. And when something flows, it's enjoyable. That's why simplifying is an act of generosity. You're not speaking to showcase what you know. You're speaking so the other person understands, so they walk away with something useful, with a clear idea that stays with them afterward. And that, paradoxically, positions you as wiser, more relevant, more influential. One of the most common communication mistakes is believing that using complex language makes you look more intelligent. But true intelligence shows when you can explain something difficult in a simple way. Einstein said it clearly, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it well enough. And this doesn't only apply to science, it applies to any form of expression. A salesperson who complicates their pitch loses sales. A leader who gives confusing instructions loses authority. A teacher who uses unnecessary jargon loses students' attention. Language is not a barrier that separates you from others. It's a bridge that connects you. But that bridge needs to be walkable, clear, direct. Otherwise, no one crosses it. To practice simplification, try this powerful exercise. Every time you explain an idea, reduce it to a single sentence. A clear sentence, without embellishments. Then express it in words a teenager would understand. And finally, ask yourself, does this sentence create a clear image in the mind? If it doesn't, it's not ready yet. Because clear ideas are visual, concrete, tangible. You can see them, feel them, remember them. And to reach that point, you must polish, cut, refine, like a sculptor removing what's unnecessary to reveal the essential form. That's how clear communication works. It's an act of subtraction, not addition. You can also train yourself by observing great communicators. Listen to how they build their sentences, how they use concrete examples, how they avoid unnecessary jargon, how they use simple metaphors to explain complex concepts, how they're not afraid of silence, because they know there's no need to fill every second with words, and above all, how they leave a mark with very little. You don't need to speak for 20 minutes to be remembered. Sometimes a single well-crafted sentence transforms more than an entire speech. Simplification also applies to your body language, your tone, your structure. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Avoid exaggerated gestures. Eliminate filler words. Speak in shorter sentences. Breathe between ideas. Leave space for the other person to absorb. Don't try to impress, try to impact. Because impressing might be temporary, but impacting is lasting. And impact comes from what is clear, precise, and heartfelt. In important conversations, presentations, interviews, or debates, the one who masters the art of simplification has the upper hand. Because while others get lost in explanations, justifications, embellishments, you move forward with sentences that cut like a blade, that pierce through confusion, that light up the scene. And you don't have to be aggressive to be powerful. You can speak calmly and still be the strongest voice in the room. Because clarity has a power of its own. The mind recognizes it, appreciates it, and remembers it. The world is already full of complex messages. That's why those who can make the difficult simple become indispensable. In a work meeting, they're the ones who clarify confusion. In a negotiation, they lay out the facts. In a talk, they leave behind a phrase that gets repeated. In everyday life, they are the ones whose message lands, touches, and transforms. And that's not a magical gift. It's a conscious practice. It's the decision to prioritize what matters, to trust in the strength of simplicity, to honor the other person's mind with words that don't confuse but clarify. Simplifying is also a form of respect. Respect for your time, for the other person's time, for the mental energy we're all managing every day. It's understanding that beauty lies in clarity. That you don't have to be complex to be deep. That you don't have to sound sophisticated to be powerful. That less is often more. And that when you speak from the essence, without unnecessary decoration, your voice becomes an arrow. Fast, precise, straight to the heart. That's when you'll realize that simplifying doesn't reduce the value of what you say, it elevates it. It makes the important shine, the essential stand out, the truth be heard. Because in a sea of noise, the clearest message is the one that lasts. And in the listener's mind, only what is understood remains. What confuses is forgotten. But what illuminates, stays. And you have the power to illuminate, if you choose to speak with clarity. Law 11. Personalize your voice. Find your style. The most powerful voice isn't the loudest, nor the one that best imitates others. It's the one that most authentically represents who you are. In a world where many try to emulate role models, copy styles, repeat formulas, or adopt borrowed tones, standing out doesn't mean speaking like someone else, it means speaking like you. With your story, your rhythm, your energy, your unique way of seeing the world. Finding your communication style isn't a destination you arrive at overnight, but a process of discovery, of stripping away what's false and reconnecting with what is truly yours. And that process begins when you stop looking outward and start looking inward. Because no one else can speak like you if you decide to be fully yourself. From a young age, we begin to shape the way we speak based on what we think is accepted, respected, or admired. We adopt tones, phrases, gestures, even postures that don't necessarily reflect who we are, but who we think we should be. Over time, this layer of imitation becomes so thick we forget what our original voice sounded like. But it's still there, waiting to be awakened. Authentic communication isn't about inventing something new. It's about remembering what was always there. Your way of expressing things, your emotional language, your natural way of speaking your truth. When you reconnect with that, your voice stops sounding forced, your presence feels more grounded, and your message becomes more human. One of the first steps to finding your style is embracing your story. Everything you've lived, your successes, your mistakes, your lessons, your wounds, has shaped the way you see reality. And that perspective is unique. No one else has your exact experiences, your references, your emotions. That's your treasure. Instead of hiding your story, use it. Share it. Lean on it to give context, to teach, to inspire. When you speak from lived experience, your voice gains a strength that can't be faked. Because you're speaking from truth, not theory. And that truth carries a magnetic power that needs no embellishment or justification. It just needs to be expressed, clearly and courageously. Another key element is your rhythm. Some people have a fast-paced voice, others are more deliberate. Some use a lot of imagery, others get straight to the point. Some are more energetic, others more reflective. There's no right way. What's right is what represents you, what makes you feel like you're not performing, not hiding. Sometimes, in the beginning, your rhythm might be affected by nervousness or insecurity. But with practice, that rhythm stabilizes, and your real flow emerges. Don't try to conform to a style that isn't yours. Instead, notice when you feel most at ease speaking, when your voice flows best, when you stop worrying about how you're saying it and just focus on what you're saying. That's where your style lives. Your communicative power is directly tied to your level of authenticity. The truer you are to yourself when speaking, the stronger your presence becomes. Because you're not wasting energy upholding an image, you're using all your energy to deliver what matters. That coherence is felt. People sense when someone is comfortable in their own voice. And that comfort builds trust, connection, and respect. Imitation may work for a while, but it eventually collapses. Authenticity, on the other hand, expands. It renews itself. It grows with you. Avoid comparisons. You don't need to sound like that speaker you admire, or use the same vocabulary as that leader you follow. It's fine to be inspired, to study the greats, to learn techniques and observe nuances. But all of it should pass through your filter, your essence, your understanding of the world. Take what resonates with you and discard the rest. There's nothing more powerful than someone who has chosen how they want to sound, how they want to express themselves, how they want to connect. Not from external pressure, but from inner freedom. Personalizing your voice also means embodying your values. What do you stand for? What ideas light you up? What kind of emotions do you want to evoke in others? What kind of impact do you want to leave every time you speak? When you're clear on those answers, your style starts to take shape. You're no longer improvising from a void, you're building from your identity. And that construction, like any valuable work, takes time, trial and error, feedback, and evolution. But it's worth every second. Because at the end of the road, you won't just have found your speaking style. You'll have found a deeper way to embody yourself, to show up, to lead from your truth. A personalized voice is also a free voice. Free from others' expectations, from masks, from learned fears. And that freedom is felt. You hear it in how someone enters a conversation, how they hold a pause, how they say, "I don't know," when they don't know, how they laugh when something moves them. It's a living voice. Relatable. Real. And that's what people are most hungry for today. Realness. Someone they can relate to. Someone who's not pretending to be perfect, but who dares to be sincere. Training your personal style doesn't mean boxing yourself in. It means having a clear base you can adapt from with flexibility. Of course, you can adjust your energy depending on the context. You can use different tones depending on the audience. But all of that happens from a defined communicative identity, from a solid root. And that root is you. That's your vocal brand. That's what sets you apart. That's what makes it so that even when others say similar things, the way you say them carries a different weight, a unique flavor, an echo that stays. And perhaps the most powerful part of this process is that, by personalizing your voice, you inspire others to do the same. By showing up real, you give others permission to do so too. By speaking from your story, you invite others to honor theirs. And just like that, every conversation becomes a space of shared authenticity, where the goal isn't to outshine, but to create meaning together. Where no one imitates to belong, but expresses to contribute. That's the new leadership, a voice that doesn't dominate from ego, but leads from truth. To speak with power is not to speak like someone else, it's to speak like you, in your fullest expression. It's knowing that you don't need perfection, just presence. That you don't need to imitate, only to remember who you are. And that your story, your rhythm, and your energy, when aligned with your intention, create a style that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Because when you speak from your truth, your voice becomes a signature. And a signature cannot be replicated. A signature leaves a mark. A signature is identity. A signature is authentic power. Law 12. To communicate is to lead. Every time you open your mouth to express an idea, you are exercising leadership. Whether you realize it or not, whether you intend to or not, every word you choose, every tone you use, every silence you hold has an effect on others. It influences how they think, how they feel, how they act. Because communication is not merely the transmission of information. Communication is the transformation of realities. And whoever transforms, leads. You might not be a boss or hold a formal title, but if you know how to use your voice with clarity, intention, and presence, you are leading. You are guiding others' attention, setting an emotional direction, sparking movement in ideas and decisions. Speaking is leading, and when you become aware of that, your way of communicating changes forever. Many believe leadership only happens on big stages, in public speeches, or during moments of crisis. But real leadership happens every day, in the ordinary. In a conversation with a colleague, at a family gathering, in a message you send, in an opinion you share. Every time you choose how to say something, you're making a leadership decision. Because you are affecting others, influencing their perception, helping them see what they hadn't seen or feel what they hadn't felt. And that's no small thing. It's a huge responsibility, but also an incredibly powerful opportunity. One of the keys to leading through communication is having a clear intention. What do you want to spark in the other person? What energy do you want to leave behind after you speak? What emotional or mental shift do you want to inspire? Speaking without intention is speaking randomly. But when your intention is clear, your words align, your energy focuses, your message sharpens, and the impact becomes inevitable. The voice that leads isn't necessarily the most eloquent or charismatic. It's the most coherent, the one that knows why it's speaking. The one that doesn't seek validation, but transformation. Leading with your voice also requires empathy. You cannot influence if you don't know who you're speaking to. You need to read the other person, understand their inner world, connect with their reality. Only then can you adapt your message without losing your essence. Because leadership is not about imposing, it's about connecting in order to guide. It's not telling someone what to do, it's showing them a path they hadn't considered. And to do that, your voice must be in service of others, not just your ego. It must be in service of a greater purpose, a value you want to uphold, a vision you want to share. The voice of a true leader does not shout, dominate, or belittle. The voice of a leader holds space, inspires, uplifts. It doesn't seek applause, it seeks awakening. It doesn't focus on being right, it focuses on provoking reflection. It doesn't rely on fear, it relies on truth. And that kind of voice is built with practice, intention, and emotional responsibility. Because someone who knows their words have impact chooses each one more wisely. They don't speak just to speak. They speak to serve, to build, to enlighten. True influence is born from congruence. If your words say one thing but your energy says another, no one will follow you. But if what you say, what you do, and what you transmit are aligned, you become a point of reference. Not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Because you inspire through presence, not just argument. Because your voice isn't a performance, it's an expression of your identity. And in a world full of masks, that's a deeply powerful form of leadership. It's also crucial to understand that leading with your voice doesn't always mean saying more. Sometimes, leadership is knowing when to be silent, when to listen, when to hold a pause that invites reflection, when to ask a question that sparks internal transformation. Communicative leadership isn't measured by word count, but by quality of impact. And that impact is born from your level of awareness. From how deeply connected you are with what you're saying. From how present you are. From how emotionally available you are to hold space for others through your words. You can use your voice to lead a team, to guide your family, to motivate an audience, to resolve a conflict, to inspire social change. Your voice can be a seed, or a poison. It can unite or divide, build bridges, or raise walls. And all of that depends on your level of awareness when you communicate. That's why, every time you speak, remember, you're leading. You're leaving a mark. You're setting an example, even if you don't realize it. Because someone is listening. Someone is modeling your energy. Someone is making decisions based on what you say. And that power should never be taken lightly. To strengthen your leadership through voice, it's also important to cultivate your vision. What change do you want to see in the world? What values do you want to expand through your conversations? What impact do you want your voice to have beyond the present moment? When that vision becomes clear, your message elevates. You no longer speak from reactivity. You speak from purpose. You no longer respond impulsively. You choose with intention. And that voice, aligned with a greater purpose, carries a different vibration. It's a voice that inspires because it's connected to something bigger than ego. Speaking like a leader doesn't mean sounding perfect. It means being committed to your personal growth, your integrity, your ability to serve something that benefits others. You don't need to master every technique. You need to master your intention, your energy, your message. You need to be willing to reflect, to refine, to learn from every conversation. Because the voice that leads doesn't arise from superiority. It arises from devotion, from the desire to contribute, from the passion to awaken the best in others through the best in you. And so, every conversation becomes an opportunity to make a difference. To build where there was confusion. To heal where there was judgment. To inspire where there was fear. That is the power you hold every time you speak. Don't underestimate it. Don't use it randomly. Don't waste it on complaints or empty criticism. Use it to elevate. Use it to guide. Use it to move others toward a more conscious version of themselves. Because you don't just speak. You lead. And that leadership, when practiced with responsibility, can change more lives than you imagine. One word at a time. One conversation at a time. One authentic message at a time. Because when your voice leads from truth, it doesn't need to shout, the world listens. Conclusion, the power is within you. Be a voice, not an echo. You've made it this far not by accident, but by purpose. Something inside you, perhaps silent for years, has always known that your voice was not being used to its fullest power. That there were messages you didn't dare to express, ideas you hid out of fear, opinions you silenced to avoid judgment, and truths you pushed down because you believed they weren't important enough. But today, after walking through these 12 laws, you can no longer deny a fundamental truth. The power is within you. Not outside, not on grand stages, not in famous voices, not in people who seemed born knowing how to speak. The power is in you. Waiting. Demanding space. Calling to awaken. Throughout this journey, you've discovered that communication is not simply about speaking. That your voice is not just sound. That influence is not just about persuasion. You've realized that every word can build or destroy, that every pause can attract or disperse, that every glance can connect or distance. You've learned that fear is not an obstacle but a signal. That confidence is not a gift but a practice. That structure does not imprison, it empowers. That silence can be more eloquent than noise, and that when your body aligns with your message, it becomes a channel of truth. You've seen that your tone is not accidental, it's a tool. That listening is not surrender, it's mastery. That emotion does not limit, it propels. That clarity doesn't make you less profound, it makes you more unforgettable. That your style doesn't need permission, it needs courage. And that every time you speak with awareness, you lead, without applause. But there's one last barrier to break. The idea that you must wait for the perfect moment, the right opportunity, the ideal circumstance to begin using your voice. That wait, justified by countless excuses, is a mental trap. You don't need more time. You need more decision. You don't need everything to be aligned. You need to dare, even against the wind. Because your voice doesn't require perfection, it requires intention. It requires presence. It requires you to stop being an echo of what others say and start being a voice with identity, with strength, with direction. The world doesn't need more noise. There's already too much of that. What the world desperately needs is truth. A truth spoken with respect, with firmness, with courage. A truth that does not impose but also does not hide. A truth that, once spoken, opens possibilities, awakens consciousness, and ignites hearts. And that truth lives in you. It's not out there, not in books you haven't read, not in techniques you haven't mastered. It's in your story, in your values, in your lessons, in the scars you carry, in the moments you fell and found the strength to speak again. All of that forms your voice, not just as a sound, but as a silent declaration, I am here. This is what I believe. This is what I see. This is what I want to build with you. That voice, when trained, doesn't just persuade, it guides. Because it's not trying to win arguments, it's trying to create clarity. Not trying to shine brighter than others, it's trying to spark something in others. Not trying to impose, it's trying to inspire. And when that happens, the impact is inevitable. So don't wait any longer. You don't need permission. You don't need to be validated, selected, or applauded. You're no longer here to ask for space. You're here to take it. To inhabit your presence with your own voice. To stop repeating what's expected and start saying what you truly believe. To dare to speak, even when your voice trembles. To stand by your message, even when no one else understands it at first. To trust that your voice, when born from your truth, will find its audience, its purpose, its destination. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can start today, in small ways. You can start with a more honest conversation, with an opinion you once withheld, with sustained eye contact, with a conscious pause, with a deep breath before you speak. You can begin practicing each of the laws you've learned, correcting your habits, shaping your energy, refining your style. Because this is not about sudden transformation. It's about sustained evolution. About turning your voice into an increasingly pure channel of your purpose. About no longer using it to please, but to contribute. Remember this, your voice is a gift. An instrument that can heal, inspire, and lead. A bridge that can connect different worlds, reconcile differences, and reveal truth. But that gift must be used with awareness. With intention. With bravery. Because if you don't do it, if you don't dare, if you don't speak, perhaps no one else will say what only you can say. And that would be a loss, not just for you, but for all those waiting to hear you. Maybe without knowing. Maybe without asking. But deeply needing it. So go out there. Not to impress. Not to fit in. Not to sound like someone else. Go out there to share what lives inside you. To say what you believe can make the world better. Even just a small part of it. To show that it is possible to speak from the roots, with clarity, with emotion skillfully managed. To prove that a trained voice is not cold or artificial, but more human, more free, more powerful. And above all, go out there to lead. Not with hollow authority, but with authentic presence. Not with shouting, but with direction. Not from imposition, but from inspiration. Because communication is a sacred act. And you, with your story, your rhythm, your energy, are more than ready to honor that act with every word you speak. Be a voice, not an echo. Because an echo repeats, but a voice transforms. And now you know. Now is your moment. And now your message deserves to be heard. Not tomorrow. Today. Here. Now. With the full force of your truth. With the full presence of your power. With the full clarity of someone who no longer waits, because they've decided to speak. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to continue deepening your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another powerful audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your true potential. Click now, and I'll meet you there.